Hi everyone and welcome to another Zombies Are Cool painting tutorial. Today we're going to be taking a bit of a look at how to paint a Reclaimer Captain from the Dark Potential line of miniatures. I began by assembling the miniature. This was a very easy one to assemble as it only required me to glue on one of the arms. Other than that, the entire thing was already assembled for me. I also made up a nice little base, very easy to do. I just used a bit of wire mesh sort of stuff, a couple of bits of paper clip and some cork to construct what is a very simple but still kind of interesting base for the model. Next I proceeded to prime the miniature and the base, and to do this I used a life colour white primer. Now I don't dilute this at all, and because it's fairly thick I use a Patriot 105 with a fairly large needle nozzle setup to apply this to the miniature. I also ramp up the pressure on my compressor a little bit, spraying around 40 to 45 psi. As you can see throughout the tutorial, I am using a cork block to hold my miniature. I definitely recommend these as they're a really nice way to keep that model under control without having to worry about sort of trying to stick it either to the base or to some sort of glue tack or something, so I definitely recommend it. If you're looking to pick some of these up, just go to your hardware store, find some of those cheapy sanding blocks and then just chop it up into a few chunks and use that. Now I finally get to the painting stage. I begin by applying a layer of Minitair blood-stained mud to the entire miniature. This is going to form the basis of both the camo pattern, which is going to be on the cloth, and the armour, which is going to be in a nice sort of brown colour as per the concept art. Next, I proceeded to highlight the entire model using Minitair Muddy Brown. Finally, I finish off the last airbrushed highlights using Minitair Cracked Leather. Now what I do is I begin to work on the camo effect which I want to achieve on the cloth parts of the miniature. So this is essentially his shirt and his pants. Now to do this I'm going to use a variety of colours. I'm going to use like a bone colour, a white, a black and a dark brown. And the particular colours you want to use doesn't matter at all. I just picked out some random ones. I think I used Privateer press paints here, but really all I'm doing is I'm going back and forth between the colours and I'm painting in sort of stripy, blobby sort of patterns all over the pants. Now the paint I'm working with is relatively thin because I want it to be a little bit transparent, and I'm just trying to get sort of a camo pattern essentially. If you're trying to do this, I recommend going onto the internet and having a bit of a look at different sort of schemes so you can sort of find one that appeals to you. At the moment you can see this looks very similar to the brown armour because naturally we've got that initial base colour still showing through all these different patterns we've put on here with the different paint colours, but don't worry, this next stage is really going to change that and make this look like a different material to the model's armour. The final stage for the cloth was to apply a wash of Secret Weapon, the Sepia wash, to these areas. As you can see in the finished pictures, this creates a real differentiation between the cloth and the armour as far as colour is concerned, and sort of just brings a new element to the miniature, because right now, without this wash, the model looked very brown and drab, and while it still looks that way in the end, it's good to have some different colours added in there for visual interest. I feel it's appropriate to mention at this point that this model obviously doesn't look anything like the concept art that came with the miniature. This model was originally painted up by Worthy Painting for the box art, and essentially they painted it up in a very cartoony style with lots of edge highlighting, minimalistic contrast, and very sort of a very cartoony fantasy sort of colour scheme with bright white cloth and brown armour. Personally, I'm not a real fan of this. I don't like the style or the colour scheme chosen by the guys, so what I decided to do was take my own sort of spin-off of this colour scheme and make it a bit more gritty and realistic, which personally suits my taste a little bit better. That being said, if you want to paint it like the box, then by all means go ahead, but you might want to look at someone else's tutorial, because obviously mine doesn't really cover that in any detail. For the next stage, I use Minitair Black mixed 1-to-1 with Minitair Drying Retarder. The reason I do this is I'm using a very fine brush and I need a slower drying time so that the paint doesn't dry on the brush bristles pretty much instantly. So what I use the black for is for A, lining all of the details on the model, going around the armour and the cloth areas and just sticking a little black line in any of the deep recesses. And secondly, I use it for base coating all of the areas which are going to be black or silver. So this is all the details like the gun, the soles of the shoes, that little round thing on the model's back, and his like breathing apparatus, etc, etc. The next stage was to base coat the flesh tones on the model's face using Minitair Rugged Skin. I then proceeded to shade the face using 3 different washes. I started out using Privateer Press Flesh Wash, I then moved on to using a purple wash made by Games Workshop, and then finally I finished off with a very light and selective application of Soft Body Black Wash by Secret Weapon Miniatures. Next, I decided to create some paint chipping effects on some of the armour plates. To do this, I simply used black paint and I applied some scratch-like marks to strategic areas of the model where I thought damage would realistically occur. After I'd done this, I went back with a light bone colour and highlighted the underside of each of these paint chips with a very thin line of this colour to achieve a more three-dimensional effect. I now decide to paint in all of the black areas. I'm going to be painting in the gun, the grenade, and a few details on the model's back, as well as the soles of the shoes in this black colour. Now, black is naturally something that some people find quite challenging, and to sort of simplify things, what I've done here is I've used a series of 5 paints by Minitair. So if you want to achieve this exact effect, you'll find it pretty easy. If you've got the Minitair paints, you can just follow along. If you don't have the Minitair series of paints, naturally you can just pick and choose a series of grey colours from another line like Games Workshop, Vallejo, whatever. Essentially, I started off with a fairly general highlight of Minitair Coal. Like I said, this is fairly general. I'm applying it to a considerable area of the raised surfaces where I think light would hit. Next off, I go in with Minitair Charred Stone. This is applied to a smaller area than the previous highlight and is, still covering a decent bit of the painted surface, but it'd be probably around a quarter of the area, somewhere around there. Next, I go in with Minitair Rock. This is the first sort of edge highlight, if you will. This is a fairly large edge highlight. I apply it so there's pretty thick lines along the edges, and I try and smooth it out fairly carefully into the coal because I don't want it to be too stark. Next, I go in with Base Grey for our second last highlight. This is a very, very fine edge highlight which is just hitting the bright surfaces and really sort of makes all of this black effect pop out. And then finally, I go in with Skull White, and this is applied only to the brightest edges of the miniature. And again, this is a very fine edge highlight. I find this series of paints sort of gets the nice black effect that I was sort of going for. So I definitely recommend if you've got these or if you're able to pick them up, look into it because it works really well. And because these paints are already sort of thinned out, you don't have to worry, as I said, about dilution and things like that too much. So it really makes it much easier for you if you're struggling with painting black. Alright, so that just leaves one thing to do, and that is all of the metallics. So I start off with a base coat of gunmetal made by Vallejo from their Game Color line, and this is applied to all of the areas that I want to be in metallics, which is essentially the mask on the guy, as well as that little circle thing on the gun, plus the cartridges in the magazine thing, which is coming out of his gun as well. Next, I started to shade the metallics. The first layer of shading was done using Citadel Gryphonne Sepia wash, which is one of their old washes. The new equivalent, I think, is Serif Sepia, I believe so anyway. And after I applied this, I applied a wash of Secret Weapon Dark Sepia. Now these two layers are sort of our mid-tones, if you will. They're going to be the transition between the metallic and the dark black, which is what's going to be in the recesses. I applied the final layer of shading using Raven Black by Minitair. I thinned this out so it was the consistency of a glaze, and I applied, 4 to 5 layers of this in a very thin application to achieve nice smooth gradient. This is applied only to the deepest recesses and the areas that would be in total shadow. I finally finished off the metallics by re-highlighting these areas. I started off by re-highlighting using the initial base colour of the Gunmetal Metal by Vallejo Game Color, and then I did the final highlights using Silver from Vallejo Game Color. And as you can see, here we have the finished result. I limited myself to 2 hours painting on this guy simply because I wanted to try and get a nice looking model, but on the other hand I didn't really want to spend a very long time on it. I think the black and the colour scheme in general is fairly effective, and I'm happy with it as an alternate scheme to the original one developed by the game manufacturer. As far as the model goes, I'm actually pretty happy with the quality of the miniature. Naturally, it's not right up there with, obviously the big companies like GW, Reaper Miniatures, etc. However, it's really pretty nice, and I heard a lot of negative feedback about the quality of the Dark Potential models, and that's something I disagree with. I actually think they're not too bad. So thanks for watching, guys. I had quite a bit of fun doing this model, and I hope it's been helpful for you, and yeah, I'll see you in a later video.